So how do you prep your brass? Hi everyone, it's the 4-Gun Guy, and today I wanted to kind of take you through my process of how I prep my brass for reloading. Now, I've got a process that I outlined in a video probably about 2 years ago, but I've made some tweaks and some changes to that process, and I wanted to go over that today. I'm going to try to spend less than a minute on each one of these stages, or 2 minutes at the most, depending on how important they are. But I just wanted to go through it, kind of tell you how I do things. It's not the right way, the wrong way, the perfect way, the imperfect way. It's just how I've done it and how I've gotten really good results by doing that. So if you're ready to go, let's get to it. Well, guys, let's talk about some documentation first. I've kind of moved over to the side so I can put these up on the screen and I don't have the camera glaring at them. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the schematics that you will get from both your barrel manufacturer and your cartridge or your case manufacturer. So I use Alpha Brass, and so I emailed them and said, hey, can you send me the specs on your 6BRA case? And they did, and that's what this is. I'll put this up here. I took this one little area, blew it up, and so I've got it blown up on the other side of this. And this is just laminated sheets of paper that I printed out. But this gives you all of the specs for the case. Then Preferred Barrel Blanks, who did my the barrel, so they reamed the chamber and everything, I emailed them and asked them for their specs. So they gave me the schematic of their reamer specs. So this is the reamer that's reaming the chamber in the barrel. And I can take these two and start to look at them and see, you know, what's going on. Does it look like everything's going to be fine? And it is, because they know what they're doing. Then I created a diagram of my own. And this diagram, again, I'll put it up here, has the web diameter, for example, the shoulder diameter, the neck OD, the wall, neck wall of a new cartridge. And then as I reload a batch, so let's say this is a batch of 100, I would use this document, say there's 100 units here. It's 1x fired, 2x fired, 3x fired, whatever. The lot number, which I just have a numbering system that I use for the lot number. And then you can see the primer powder charge and all that stuff, and any notes at the bottom here that I may want to include. I will take the measurements then of the fired brass, put those down here, and then once I size everything and process this brass, just before I load it, I'll write the sized measurements down here. It's a lot of work, guys. I know a lot of you don't do this. You don't mess with this. If you don't want to, don't. I just like kind of having a process in mind. And then the overall process for managing the case is in this step-by-step document here. So I put this on top of my deal. I put this on top of here. And now I know where every batch of cases are in the process. I know it's kind of crazy, but it really helps me, because if you look up on top of that arm wall over here, you'll see probably 5 or 6 of these things, and it's cases in different stages of this process. So I may have just removed the case marking on some and deprimed them, and others, they're all the way down to ready to be trimmed. So this just helps me keep everything straight in my mind. And yeah, then this document, I just use this as my Bible, and as I go down it, I check these off until we're done, and then they're loaded and ready to go. Then I take this off of this lid and I put it on my case. So when I have a case of loaded cartridges, then I have it on that case of loaded cartridges. So now I know exactly what's been done with this. This is 1x fired that is in this case. Once I fire it and put the empties in here, it will become in my next When I do the next one for this batch, it'll be 2x fired. So that's just how I keep track of things. Let's go through the process now. And like I say, I'm going to try to spend less than 2 minutes on each one of these stages and just kind of walk you through my thinking. Now, the very first step is actually a two-step process. The first thing that I'm going to do is use a little nail polish remover. I just dump it onto a paper towel in one of these little, like a spice dish or something. And remember, I mark my brass on the rear of it. So I put my mark on the rear, and all I have to do is come in here, twist it on that towel, and it gets that right off of there. This doesn't hurt the brass. I've been doing this forever. Nothing's happened. I leave the primer in because I don't want any acetone to possibly get inside the case or to mess with the primer pocket or the flash hole. So this is what I do. Now, after this, after I clean these, then I come in with I think this is 600 steel wool, and I do the neck. So again, just very, very easily, 3 twists. That's it, just 3 twists. And then you're cleaning any residue that was on the neck off. And this helps us when we're taking all our measurements. So I don't want any crud on the outside of that neck if I'm going to take my measurements to make sure everything's looking okay. And again, I'm not bearing down on this, guys. And then we can move on to the next stage. Well, now I've cleaned the markings off the case. Now I'm going to deprime. I've been using this Harvey D primer for when I first started here, and I just like it. You can feel it fit into the primer pocket. You just pull it there, snap it, and then you're done, and then you put the case into another container. But I just like this. Some people use their press. Some people have another depriming. Whatever you want to use to deprime, whatever suits you, your way of doing it is great. I like this because I can take my cases out into the living room. I can watch TV, and I'll just sit there and deprime my brass. So Harvey deprimer works really well for this. I really like it. And it doesn't, it's not like having it in your press where you could come down on it, because I've done that on some of the Creedmoor cases. You come down kind of hard and it misses the hole and then it hits your case. I just don't like that. So there you go. We have deprimed, and let's move on. Well, here's where I'll start to take some of the measurements. So I've got my mitutoyos out, and I've got the comparator and the overall. So this is where this document starts to come into play, right? So if I put that up there, I'll just sit here. I'll take a sample, maybe 10 cases. This isn't, it's not scientific. But I'll just run some concentricity on here. And again, this is just for me to see am I seeing anything out of the ordinary? Things generally don't pop up. I haven't had anything really pop up at this stage. You're generally within, I'm within 1/2000 from the neck standpoint. And then, as I said, I'm not going to do all this on camera, but I'll just start taking the measurements of, say, 5 to 10 cases, marking the average down on my document here, and then I've got those measurements. So this is the whole part of the measuring and getting everything logged on this sheet. So we've marked the case, we've deprimed, measurements, concentricity, and now we're going to throw them in the tumbler and dry tumble them. Okay, let's talk about dry tumbling. Now, I use corncob media here, and there's just a couple things that I've done that have really worked out well for me. Number one, I use this Turbo Bright. It's worked really well for me, but you have to be careful of how you introduce this to your corncob media, okay? I usually empty this out, wipe this down with a paper towel, then I'll take this Turbo Bright, put it on a paper towel, and I'll wipe the inside of this bin of the tumbler with the Turbo Bright. I never drop it into the corncob media because it'll get all gummed up, and then you'll get little balls of corncob media in your cases, and you don't know if it's gotten down inside the case and you haven't gotten it out. So just be careful about that. But I've realized that if I just coat this, then I let this dry, then I introduce the corncob media, then as it tumbles these cases, they rub up against the side, they get this Turbo Bright off, and it works. One other thing to consider, I've gone to this and I love it. I get bounce dryer sheets, and I'll take my scissors, and for one round in there, I'll do like 5 strips of these, and I'll just throw them in here. And I tell you what, 2 things. These actually help brighten up your brass, and they cut down on the dust. When you get your brass out of there, it's not as dusty. It doesn't have that as much film on the outside of the brass. So that's how I would tumble this, and let's just assume that we've tumbled them. After you've tumbled, now I've already done this, but I wanted to show you after you've dry tumbled, and I've got some strips of old t-shirts that I put in here after I get the corncob material out, and then I rotate this again, and these strips kind of help clean that brass off. Then what I do is I bring them upside down here, so just like this. And I'm just going to show it to you real quickly. Then I have a pipe cleaner, and I use this pipe cleaner, and I look at the primer pockets and the flash holes, and if there are any of this corncob material in there, these pipe cleaners work really well. They won't damage your flash hole. And then I just push that down there. Then I have like a Ryobi air deal here that I just kind of blow those through, and then we're done. So I didn't know if you'd have questions about the corncob material. So that's how I clean those. And of course I do, as I do all that, I have them in a like an old t-shirt, and I kind of gently rub them to get as much of that material off as I can. And so that takes care of the tumbling. Now I'm going to clean, the next step is to clean the inside of the neck, because I want to do that before we anneal. If you look inside the neck there, you can see, some of the powder residue and whatnot. So I use my Franklin prep machine here, and I just have, this is a nylon brush. It's a nylon brush. It's a smaller caliber than or just right at the caliber of the bullet. So I turn this on, down and up. I make sure that I do not touch the flash hole. I'm just putting it in there just like that. That's all I'm doing. And all that's doing, guys, again, is getting that residue off the inside of that neck. So when I anneal, I don't have anything baking on the inside of that neck that could interfere with my neck tension. So now let's move on to the annealing. Now we're at the annealing stage. So we've dry tumbled, clean inside the neck. Now we're annealing, and I'm going to do a whole review on this bench source annealing machine. It's so far it's kind of a love-hate relationship. It's not as easy as you think it may be, and so yeah, this you've got to make some changes, especially if you're going to be annealing this smaller case. And basically what I'm after when I'm annealing is right as it turns orange. See that right there? That's when you want it out of the flame. I've tried Temple Lac, I've tried everything else. I watched Eric Cortina. I think he does a great job in his video of talking about how he's annealing. And so far, this is working out pretty good. So here we are, annealing. Whatever machine you want to use to anneal is fine. I do anneal my brass every firing. So I don't skip firings. Every time I fire, I come back, I follow this process, and in the process is annealing the brass. So here we are at annealing, and after this we're going to move on to lubing and resizing. I have a bottle that is 12 parts, 99% isopropyl alcohol, and 1 part of lanolin. So I just put some notches on this bottle and I fill it up to where I need to fill it. And then I lay the cases out on a cookie sheet that my wife has graciously let me use for all this. And now what I'm going to do is, I'm just lightly going across and spraying it. And you want to do this outdoors, guys. You don't want to do this in the house, right? See me in my shorts, and then I'm coming over here. And you want to make sure that you get all 4 sides as well. And that's it. That's it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to let this sit for about 20 minutes. And what I do is I have another pie tin or another baking sheet I'm going to go in and get. And I just lay it on top of this so bugs and anything that might fall out of the sky won't get in the cases. And then I let it sit outside here for about 20 minutes. Let that alcohol kind of evaporate, and then that leaves the lanolin on there as the lube. So next we'll get to the resizing. Well, I have my full-length sizing station set up, and just one quick thing of warning here, and that is when you're using your comparators, make sure you have the right comparator for the case that you're working with, because now I have 6.5 Creedmoor and 6mm BRA. So actually, when I first started working with this, I had my 6.5 in here, and I'm sitting there taking measurements going, what's going on here? This doesn't look right, blah. And then I looked at it and realized I had the wrong insert in there, so I got the right one in there. Now we're good to go. So what we're doing here is, remember, the reason we're doing this is, if I took a bullet right now from a fired case that has not been sized, the bullet would slide right into this case, right? Because there's no tension there. This case expanded when I fired it, and the projectile came out the first time. So what we're doing here by resizing it is I'm full length sizing it, which means it's impacting the entire length of the case, and I'm closing in that neck so we can seat a bullet and there will be some tension. So that's what I'm doing here. If I look at the measurements and I take a measurement of a fired case that has not been sized, I get 1.1105, right? I don't know if you can see that, 1.1105. When I size it, take the measurement, 1.1090 or 85 basically. So what that's telling me is I bumped the shoulder back 0.02 of an inch, right? And that just gives you some clearance in case you get anything on these cases. Now, one thing I do is I have this rag here, because as I take the case from the tray over to here, I just wipe the butt end of it, the base of it, on that rag to get anything off, any of this sticky lube that might be on there off of there, so it doesn't impact the height that this case is sitting in the press. So again, just a couple things. Make sure you've got the right comparator in there. Oh, one other thing. When you're setting everything up and you're getting ready, right? You've got a new cartridge, you're gonna resize it, and you're setting up, this is a Widden resizing die, full-length sizing die. I actually had this torqued down or too shallow or too deep, and when I resized this case, it sized it like 7 or 8 thousandths off. So instead of bumping the shoulder back 2 thousandths, I actually bumped it back like 8 thousandths. I am not going to fire this piece of brass, okay? That's just too much space in my opinion, and you could run into trouble there if you load and fire that piece of brass. So that's a gone one. And that's all I wanted to cover right now. Make sure your sizing die is correctly set. Make sure you got the right comparator. Drag your stuff across your case across a rag to get the stuff off the bottom, and then run it through the sizing, and then check every 5 to 10 cases just to make sure everything's still set up right. Let me finish this up and then we'll move into the mandrelling. We're going to come into the mandrel piece of this now, and I just want to run over a few calculations for you of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Remember, we just sized our brass. We came up with a 0.2660 outside diameter of the neck. These are the neck dimensions now. And then I'm mandreling it to expand that neck about another thousandth of an inch. So 0.2670. The wall thickness of these of the neck here is 0.027, okay, or 27 thousandths of an inch. The neck ID is 0.2400 then when I subtract the wall thickness from the outside diameter that we took. The neck ID comes to 0.2400 inches, and our bullet diameter is 0.2430 inches, which leaves us a neck tension, or the amount of tension that's going to hold that bullet in the case, in the neck, of 3 thousandths of an inch. That's a little much for me. I generally like it around 2 thousandths, but as I said, this is the very first time I'm resizing, or I'm reloading this brass. So this is one-time fired brass. I may make some adjustments. I may get a larger mandrel, maybe a 1/1000th of an inch larger mandrel. Not sure yet. I'm going to see how all this shoots. If it shoots fine, I'm not going to touch anything. But that's basically why we are mandreling, to bring that neck back out. And when I mandrel twice. Once, twice, and then I'm done. And I do it twice to minimize the spring back of the brass to come back in, right? That's why I double mandrel. And the significant difference it made in both SDs, ESs, and the accuracy. So I've just been doing this now for a couple years. And again, just bring it down, double mandrel. You want to be careful that you don't, this mandrel won't come all the way down to the primer pocket or the flash hole, so you shouldn't have any problem with that. Okay, so let me finish doing these, and then when I'm done, I'm going to run them back through the tumbler to clean off all this lube. I won't show you that because you've already seen me dry tumble. And then we're going to talk about trimming the brass and getting it ready. We've reached the trimming stage. Now, in our process here, I've got trimmed and then chamfered, deburred, and clean inside neck. Now, I'm moving from the L.E. Wilson trimming tool here to the Deburred cartridge trimmer and chamfer machine. So I'm still getting used to this thing, and I've got it calibrated, I think, pretty well for these cartridges. But basically, the old way I would do it, if you're going to do it the manual way, is I would use this L.E. Wilson case trimmer. I'd set it up, trim my cases, and then I would come over to, I'm just going to move the camera here, I would come over to, close that, I was watching Billions while I was making this. Then I'd come over to my Frankfurt Arsenal tool here, and I would chamfer and deburr, and then I would clean the inside of the case neck. What I'm going to do now is use the Deburred tool, and then I will come over here and clean the inside of the case neck just with this. So I've got this set up. Come back over here. It's a pretty cool tool. I might do a review on this, I'm not sure yet, but basically you've got it all set with the depth, everything. I've done some measurements, so I know what's going to come out of it. This thing's really noisy, so it's real simple. I'm going to take a case. It doesn't have any chamfering on it, and it's not trimmed. Turn this on. This in here. And now the inside of the neck is chamfered. The outside isn't necessarily chamfered. It's basically just deburred. And then it will trim down to a specific length. So it's a pretty quick process when you start doing this with this thing. It goes pretty fast. And then it trims them down as well if they need to be trimmed. So I'm going to go ahead and complete the trimming and chamfering, and then we will go from there. So we have trimmed, chamfered, deburred, and now I'm going to clean the inside of the neck. And I also do the primer pocket. Now some of you, because this is new brass, I probably won't do the primer pocket on these because these are pretty clean, right? From the dry tumbling and everything. But maybe every 5 or 6 firings, I'll look at the primer pockets if they need to be cleaned. This is a brush on this primer pocket cleaner. Some of you are freaking out right now. You're saying, "Oh my God, he's gonna put that little brush in there and clean the primer pockets." Yes, I do. And as I said earlier, 13 firings through my Alpha 6.5 Creedmoor brass. I've never had a problem. This is not taking any material out of this primer pocket. It is not doing that. I'm just here to tell you, it's just a very light brushing, and that's all there is to it. But I do want to clean the inside of that case neck finally once again. Remember before I cleaned it because of the annealing, and now I'm going to clean it because I don't want any residue from that corncob material to be in the neck to impact the bullet being seated or the neck tension or anything like that. So again, it's just a down and up, down and up. I'm making sure that I don't go deep enough that it impacts the primer pocket. And that's all I'm doing. I'm just taking a little bit off of the inside of that neck. And there we go. And so now the next thing to move on to is going to be seating the primers. And let's go on to that. Well, seating the primers, I'm using my Frankfurt Arsenal primer seating tool. For me, it works fine. I know there's a lot of tools out there. Guys, whatever you use is great, right? Get what works for you. If you want to spend $1,000 on it, spend $1,000. If you want to spend whatever, 150, spend 150 on it. Just make sure you get it set up right. Case in. Make sure that it's in there and the primer is seated. I can measure the depth of it. I'm looking at on 0. I've got about 3.5 thousandths of an inch seated, which is fine with me. I've never had a problem with that. I don't like to go beyond 3.5, even 4 thousandths, which is a little deep, but I've never had a misfire because of a primer being not seated well enough in the case. And so that's what we're going to do. So I'll go through, prime all these cases, and then we will move on to the powder, loading the powder. Well, guys, this is what everything up to this point has led up to, and that is actually loading the rounds. So I'm dropping the powder and seating the bullets. Now, this is an interesting session that I'm in right now because I'm actually going to be doing ladder testing for my 6BRA because I shot a match last weekend with brand new brass and just an estimated load, and I was very happy with the results. But now I've got to really find the right load, the right seating depth, and then go back and true all that up. So tomorrow I'm going to take all this out and at least try to find the right load. I'm using my auto trickler with my FX120i scale. I love this setup. It's fantastic. I've got my K&M press here and then everything else. I've got my seating die, bullet seating die. And again, I use my Mitutoyo to measure the seating die, right? I don't necessarily go by the gradations on the die itself. I just don't, because I have to make these minor adjustments, and it's just easier for me that when I'm done with my loading session that I can say, yep, it was here. I could do this, but then I'm looking at lines and all that stuff. This just makes it easier for me. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. So when I'm loading one of these, for example, I'm now at let's see, 29.4 and 30 thousandths off the lands. So at 30 thousandths off the lands, my little chart here is telling me that my gauge should be reading 2.791. So if I come up to this thing and I look at my gauge, it is 2.791. I don't know if you can see that, but that's what it says. And so the gauge is set. Drop the powder. It's 29.4. This thing's going to drop. I really like this H4895 too. It seems like it's a thinner grain than the H4350, and we got a perfect drop there, 29.4. You can't get any better than that when you're doing a video. I do have a 3-inch drop tube on my funnel, and that's just so the powder, you know, packs a little better in there in the case. With the 4350, I was really getting tight at 30, I think 31.5 grains, but with the 4895, I don't need that much. I'm going to set that in there, do this. I'm going to seat this puppy, nice and easy, bring it up. And now we should have a CBTO here of 1.655. Let's see if we came close, 1.6, that's about 1.6575. So I'll take this round and I put it down here in my warm-up rounds, and then I will adjust my gauge, redo it, and once I get it locked in, then I can just run with it. So I just wanted to show you that aspect of the reloading process. We're dropping the powder and we're seating the bullets. And then after that, we'll be marking the case. So let me finish this up and then we'll look at that aspect of it. Okay, and then after we've loaded our cartridge, we are going to do one more check on concentricity. And so I just set this in my concentricity gauge and I rotate it. And I've got about, the thing jumps on me. I've got about 2/1000ths of an inch of play here, which is within tolerance for me. Generally it's 2 to 3 thousandths, which is fine. And so that's the final concentricity check that I do. Well, the final thing that I do is mark the case. And as I said earlier, I used to mark it, you know, around the outside, but to clean that up, that just became a pain in the neck. So now all I do is just run an X on the rear of it. And that works out pretty good. You know, when I fire it, shoot it, then everyone just has to look for the red X. And I usually get, you know, 99% of my brass back during a match. And so that's it. Guys, let's run into some final thoughts because I have some things that I want to finish with. But that's basically my reloading process. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. I know it was a little long. There was a lot of process steps there. But look, any way you do your reloading, as long as you follow a process and do it right and do it safely. Just remember one thing, guys. When we load these cartridges up and we put them in the chamber of these rifles, when we pull that trigger, we're generating 50 to 65,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. And if you don't do things right here, it can lead to a catastrophic event, and it could even lead to a physical catastrophic event on your person. So, you know, I always want to stress, just please follow a process, do it right, do it safely. Now, one other thing I wanted to point out and just kind of do a shout out here was to my sister, Steph. She came over for dinner on Christmas Eve, and we lost her husband this year, George Gick. He was a heck of a guy, just a really, really great guy. And George served in the Army. Well, Steph brought me over his marksman medal, and I wasn't sure which class this was, so I looked it up. Turns out George was quite the marksman. So George earned the expert marksman medal on rifle and carbine. So I really appreciated her bringing this over. It really means a lot to me. And I'm going to try to put this on my hat during a match or two this year, and maybe George will bring me some good luck and better accuracy. Well, guys, thanks again. It's another great video that I really enjoyed doing, and I've got a lot of others coming up. I've got one on my new Revic rangefinder, love it. One on the annealing machine, one on the case trimmer that I got, the Giro case trimmer, and a few other things. So I thank you again for watching, and until next time, shoot straight.